The first time I saw her measuring my yard with a neon pink tape reel, I thought she was just confused. Maybe lost. Maybe drunk. But no, Judith Ramsey, the HOA vice president and self-declared community integrity advocate, wasn't lost. She was standing with her chunky heels in my flower bed, sunglasses on her head, clipboard in hand, and a smug look that practically screamed, "I'm about to ruin your week." I stepped outside with my coffee still in sweatpants. "Judith, what exactly are you doing in my yard?" She didn't even flinch. "We had a complaint. Your fence is encroaching on HOA green space by 4 feet. I blinked. Green space? That's my yard. I've had that fence up since I moved in. It's on my deed. She tapped her clipboard. Well, the HOA had a survey done. You're going to need to move the fence by Friday or face fines. I laughed. I genuinely thought she was joking. You had a survey done? Yes, she said, flipping through her papers. A professional one. You're welcome to bring your own. But I doubt it'll show anything different. I didn't like the way she said that. I'm Graham Sutter, by the way. I'm a contractor. I've built homes, rebuilt foundations, and poured more concrete than I care to remember. I know how to read a property line. I had the original survey from when I bought the house 7 years ago. Nothing had changed. But suddenly Judith and her little HOA minions decided my actual fence, was trespassing. The next day I got a notice in the mail. Official HOA letterhead. Violation of property line. Fine, $150 per day until correction is made. I called the HOA office. Judith answered with her usual fake cheer. "Graham, I was just about to call you. Who did your survey?" I asked. "A certified surveyor," she replied, voice sugary. "Everything's documented. Send me a copy. It's HOA property. We're not required to share internal documentation with individual homeowners." That's when I knew something was off. Real surveyors don't just show up and wave pink tape around without records. And they don't refuse to share their findings with the person whose land they're supposedly measuring. I went to City Hall that afternoon. Pulled the plat maps, got my original survey, and called in a favor from a buddy of mine, Zeke Collins, licensed land surveyor. The guy's sharp, runs his own company, and owes me for helping him build his office last year. "You think they faked a survey?" Zeke asked as he set up his tripod in my driveway 2 days later. "I don't think I know. He took measurements for 2 hours. Used GPS, laser levels, and the original deed markers buried in the corners of my lot. When he finished, he handed me the report. Your fence is 5 inches inside your property line. HOA's either lying, or whoever did their survey couldn't read a ruler." I grinned. That's all I needed. I made 10 copies of that report. 1 for the HOA, 1 for my lawyer, and 8 for my neighbors. Then I waited for Judith to come strolling by again. She didn't disappoint. Saturday morning, she strutted down the sidewalk with her clipboard, sunglasses, and a fresh stack of violation slips. "Still haven't moved the fence, Graham," she said, tapping her pen. I handed her a sealed envelope. "Here's my official rebuttal. With a certified survey proving you're full of it." She opened it, scanned the first page, and her expression cracked. This is irrelevant," she stammered. "The HOA's survey takes precedence." I leaned in. Funny, because Zeke's licensed with the state. And I just met with a real estate attorney who says if you keep pushing this, I can sue the HOA for harassment and legal costs. Judith looked like she just licked a lemon. "I'm not done yet," I added. "Next week, I'm taking this to the full board. Let's see how many of them are willing to go down with you." By the following Thursday, I had my slot on the HOA meeting agenda. It was the monthly board meeting held in the community clubhouse, a beige stucco box that smelled like old carpet and stale coffee. I walked in with a worn leather folder under one arm and Zeke trailing behind me wearing a suit for the first time in 5 years. He hated it, but he owed me, and he knew how important this was. The room was already half full, mostly retirees and a few younger families who usually didn't show unless something big was going down. They'd heard the rumors. Judith had been making her rounds, dropping vague warnings about property standard enforcement and upcoming changes. The tension in the room was thick enough to chew. Judith sat at the center of the long folding table at the front, flanked by 4 other board members. She wore a navy blazer with a gold HOA pin shining on the lapel, and her hair was pulled so tight it looked like it hurt. As soon as she saw me walk in, her jaw tightened. The meeting opened with the usual drivel: budget updates, landscaping contracts, a brief mention of someone's dog digging holes in the shared park. Then, without missing a beat, Judith moved to her own agenda item. There has been an ongoing issue with property encroachment that we, after conducting an internal survey, have deemed a violation of the community guidelines. Homeowner Graham Sutter has been notified of this issue but has failed to comply. I stood and walked to the front before she could finish. Actually, I'm here to address that. And I brought someone with me who can clarify the situation. There was a shuffle of interest in the crowd. Zeke stepped up beside me and opened a binder filled with printed maps, laser scans, and GPS data. My name is Zeke Collins. I'm a licensed surveyor with full state certification. I conducted a professional boundary survey of Mr. Sutter's property last week using updated equipment and the original deed markers. The results show that his fence is well within his legal property lines. In fact, it's several inches inside. Judith's pen froze against her notepad. She looked down, then up, and forced a brittle smile. I appreciate your input, but our surveyor reached a different conclusion. Who exactly did your survey? I asked, turning to her. Because the HOA won't release their report or the credentials of the person who conducted it. That's confidential board business, she replied, her voice clipped. Zeke didn't miss a beat. State law requires all property surveys used for legal enforcement to be conducted by a licensed professional. If you're issuing fines based on an unlicensed or undocumented survey, you're in violation of several municipal codes and possibly committing fraud. The room went still. One of the other board members, a guy named Harold who mostly kept his head down, cleared his throat. Judith, is that true? You didn't give us the actual report. You just said it was verified. Judith shot him a look that could have curdled milk. The details were summarized in my report to the board. Another member, Angela, leaned forward. Wait, did anyone else actually see the survey? Because I didn't. I assumed it had been filed properly. I pulled a folder from my briefcase and began passing copies of Zeke's certified report to each board member. This is what a real survey looks like. It includes dates, stamped images, GPS coordinates, and chain of custody documentation. If the HOA's survey is legitimate, it should look like this. And if it doesn't exist or was done by someone unlicensed, then every fine issued under it is invalid. Judith's face had gone pale. Zeke added, and if you've collected money from residents based on that false report, you could be liable for thousands in reimbursed fines. Possibly more if anyone takes legal action. A few murmurs rippled through the room. One man near the back raised his hand. My neighbor got fined last month for a supposed landscaping violation involving property lines. She paid over $600. A woman near the front jumped in. Same here. They said our shed was on common land. We had to move it and pay a fee. Angela looked directly at Judith. How many of these violations have been issued? Judith didn't answer. Harold stood. I move that we suspend all fines related to this alleged survey until we can verify its legitimacy. Angela nodded. Seconded. The vote passed before Judith could object. Her hands were visibly shaking as she gripped her pen. But I wasn't done. I turned to the crowd. I also filed a complaint with the county zoning office. If the HOA is using fabricated evidence to enforce fines, they're violating state code. And if any money changed hands based on those fines, that's potentially criminal. Judith finally snapped. You're blowing this out of proportion. We were trying to maintain the standards of the neighborhood. Zeke raised a brow. By lying about property lines? I didn't lie, she snapped. I was given information. I acted on it. Then tell us who gave it to you, Angela said. Judith stood abruptly, grabbed her clipboard, and walked out without another word. The room exploded into hushed conversation. I sat back down as Harold banged the plastic gavel to adjourn the meeting early. Zeke leaned over. She's in trouble. If she used a fake survey to issue fines, and there's no documentation to back it up, that's fraud. Straight up. I nodded. That's why I called the sheriff's office this morning. They're opening an investigation. The next 2 days were quiet, eerily so. Then Saturday morning, a county sheriff's deputy knocked on my door. Not for me for a statement. They'd already visited the HOA office and seized all documents related to property enforcement. Judith's name was all over the violation orders. Her signature, her handwriting, her return address on the envelopes. I gave them everything: copies, timestamps, and a written statement. So did Zeke. By Monday, the neighborhood was buzzing. Residents who'd previously paid fines were demanding refunds. A few had already contacted attorneys. The HOA couldn't act fast enough to distance themselves from Judith. She resigned that afternoon, citing personal reasons. But the damage was done. Angela called an emergency board meeting that evening. This time, the clubhouse was packed. Standing room only. "We've reviewed all the documentation," she announced. "There's no record of any certified survey being commissioned by the HOA. All violation letters were drafted and signed by Judith Ramsey without board approval." One man shouted, "She fined me $800 for a tree she said was on community land." Angela held up her hands. "We're initiating a full audit. Anyone who received a fine in the last 12 months will be contacted. Refunds will be issued where appropriate. And we'll be submitting all findings to the county prosecutor." Harold added, "We're also drafting new bylaws that require board approval for any fines over $50 and mandatory verification from a licensed professional for all property disputes." The crowd applauded. I didn't say much, just sat in the back and watched. There was no need to gloat. I hadn't just cleared my name, I'd helped pull the curtain back on a long-running abuse of power. Zeke nudged me. "You know, I think you just saved this neighborhood about $20,000. I nodded. "Maybe more if lawsuits start flying." He grinned. "Remind me never to pick a fight with you." I glanced at the empty chair where Judith used to sit. "Just don't lie with a clipboard in your hand. That's where it all starts." The following week, things didn't return to normal, they shifted entirely. For the first time since I moved into the neighborhood, residents weren't ducking their heads or whispering about HOA policies like they were some immutable force of nature. People were talking openly on porches, in driveways, even in the local coffee shop about their experiences, their suspicions, and the things they'd let slide for too long. I didn't go looking for more trouble. Came knocking. Angela rang my doorbell on a gray Wednesday morning. She wasn't dressed in her usual board meeting attire. Instead, she wore jeans, a fleece jacket, and carried a bulging manila folder under one arm. "Can I come in?" she asked, eyes flicking toward the street like she didn't want to be seen. I stepped aside. "You're welcome anytime." She sat at the dining table, laid the folder down, and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. "I found something," she said. "Something worse than what we expected." I waited. She opened the folder and spread out several printed emails, dated spreadsheets, and 2 letters bearing county letterheads, none of which I recognized. "There's been an account," she said. "An off-the-books HOA account Judith set up 3 years ago. She called it the Community Maintenance Fund. It wasn't listed in our official budget reports. But I traced several fines and checks from homeowners into it." I leaned over the table. "How much?" "Just over $32,000. I blinked. "You're telling me she had a shadow account paid for by fabricated violations?" Angela nodded. "And it gets worse. Those county letters? They're not real. She forged them, used them to validate the fines when people pushed back." I stared at the typed pages. The logos looked official, but the formatting was offline, spacing too tight, inconsistent seals. Someone unfamiliar with government documents might not notice, but it was sloppy once you knew what to look for. Angela continued. "She used the money for, well, we don't know everything yet, but there are receipts for a patio remodel, a home theater install, a luxury landscaping contract on her property. You're kidding. I wish I was. I rubbed my face. You reported this? I called the county auditor yesterday morning. They confirmed none of these letters came from their office. I also spoke to the sheriff's investigator handling the HOA complaint. They're widening the probe. Angela pushed a flash drive toward me. Everything's on here. I made copies for the authorities and one for you. You were the first person to push back. And frankly, I trust you more than anyone else on that board right now. I took it without a word. 2 days later, 2 unmarked government sedans parked outside the HOA office. Not patrol car suits. 3 men and 1 woman stepped out carrying briefcases and wearing the kind of quiet, composed expressions that scream enforcement without saying a word. They spent 5 hours inside. When they left, they carried out a desktop computer, 2 file boxes, and the HOA's main ledger. That night, the neighborhood message board lit up like fireworks. Everyone had theories. Some were wild runaway embezzlement, secret payoffs, even HOA ties to developers. But the facts were catching up fast. By the weekend, the sheriff's office confirmed what Angela had found. The forged letters were felonies. The unauthorized account was financial fraud. And the fabricated survey? That alone opened the HOA up to civil liability from every resident fined under it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt stunned. Judith had disappeared. Her house sat dark for 3 days straight. No cars, no lights. Mail piled in the slot. Someone said they saw a moving truck early Friday morning, rushed, unmarked, and gone before sunrise. The prosecutor's office issued a statement. An arrest warrant had been filed. Multiple charges pending. No bail recommendation. The neighborhood went quiet again, but it wasn't fear this time. It was the stillness that follows a storm when everyone steps out and sees what's left standing. Angela called an emergency town hall. No folding tables this time. Chairs were arranged in wide rows in the clubhouse. Someone brought donuts. Someone else brewed coffee. It felt less like a meeting and more like a reckoning. She stood at the front and spoke without notes. I'm not proud of how long it took us to see what was happening. Judith isolated the board, flooded us with fake documentation, and threatened legal action if we asked too many questions. That ends now. There was no applause. Just the quiet tension of people finally being heard. A man in the second row raised his hand. What happens to the HOA now? Angela didn't hesitate. We're freezing the enforcement division. No new fines, no property disputes, no letters. We're hiring a third-party firm to audit everything. And we're opening nominations for 3 new board seats. Another voice followed. What about the money she stole? We're working with the county prosecutor to seek restitution. If it's recovered, it'll go back proportionally to the homeowners who were fined. I raised my hand. Angela spotted me. Graham, I have a proposal. Optional, but I think it matters. Let's create a neighborhood oversight committee. Not just board members, residents. Rotating volunteers who review all enforcement activity before it's finalized. There were nods. A few murmurs of agreement. Angela looked at the room. All in favor? Nearly every hand went up. The energy had shifted. People weren't just reacting anymore. They were building something better. After the meeting, a woman I'd never spoken to approached me. She had short hair, painter's jeans, and a clipboard filled with sketches. I'm Sarah. I live on the east side near the creek. I design public spaces for the city. We've got some unused land next to the tennis courts. I was thinking community garden. I shook her hand. Let's do it. I didn't expect what came next. The sheriff's office called me the following Monday. Not for more information this time, they had questions about another name. Did you ever interact with a man named Peter Alton? The deputy on the line asked. No. Doesn't ring a bell. He's on the contractor invoices for Judith's home improvements. Turns out he's not licensed. Never was. We think he's connected to the scheme. That opened another door. The investigation widened beyond just the HOA. Alton had been Judith's contractor of choice for years. He'd worked on 5 properties in the neighborhood. Each one paid through the Community Maintenance Fund. And now each one under scrutiny for inflated costs, incomplete work, or outright fraud. The county filed a second set of charges. This time, conspiracy and wire fraud. I kept my head down for a while after that. The neighborhood was healing, but it needed time. Still, people knocked on my door more often now, not with complaints, but with ideas. A new tool library. A volunteer repair group for elderly residents. Someone even proposed a block party. And then, one morning, a plain envelope arrived in my mailbox. It was from the county office. Inside, a check for $470, my refund for the violation Judith had tried to fine me for. Attached was a note from the prosecutor's office, restitution processed. Thank you for your role in exposing this case. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. I walked outside, coffee in hand, and took a long look at my fence. Still standing exactly where it belonged. Not 1 inch moved. Angela drove by and waved, her back seat filled with poster boards for the next meeting. Across the street, Zeke was helping someone dig post holes. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it was ours again. And this time, we weren't letting anyone take it without a fight. The morning the subpoenas landed, the neighborhood felt different. Not louder or quieter, just alert. Like a dog that hears something you can't. People were watching from behind curtains again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was curiosity topped with a thin layer of anticipation. A squad car parked in front of the former HOA office, now locked, its blinds drawn like eyelids refusing to open. 2 plainclothes officers stepped out, one of them holding a legal-sized envelope. They didn't knock. They used a key the county clerk had provided, entered, and closed the door behind them. I watched from my garage as a black sedan pulled in behind them. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out carrying a briefcase. His badge flashed briefly as he clipped it to his belt. District Attorney's Office. No press. No grandstanding. Just a quiet arrival with heavy implications. The neighborhood had already seen the first wave of fallout. Judith's name had been permanently removed from all HOA correspondence. The new board had gone transparent, literally. They installed a bulletin board in the clubhouse window with every agenda item and vote outcome posted. But whatever was happening inside that office now, it wasn't about governance. Angela called me that evening. Her voice was low but steady. They found something else, she said. And I don't know how deep it goes yet. I sat on the back steps with my boots untied. What kind of something? There's a second ledger, hidden inside a drop ceiling tile. It tracks cash payments. Not fines. Not dues. Just cash. From who? That's what they're trying to figure out. 2 days later, a county investigator came to my door not for a statement, but for a list. He wanted names of contractors who had worked in the neighborhood over the last 5 years. Not the licensed ones. Just the ones who'd come and gone too quickly. No permits. No inspections. I gave him what I remembered: dates, trucks, faces. One guy had a van with no logo and never wore a uniform. Another used a burner phone and refused to give written estimates. They were building something. Not just a case against Judith, but a wider picture. One that, apparently, included zoning violations, unlicensed work on communal property, and unauthorized storage of construction materials on land designated as storm runoff. Then came the arrest. It happened in a grocery store parking lot 2 towns over. Judith had been avoiding her own house for weeks. The county sheriff's department coordinated with the plainclothes unit. She was taken into custody without incident. But when the report came out, it revealed something no one expected. She'd been collecting cash payments for expedited approvals on home modifications. Decks, sheds, fencing, even tree removals. All of it required board approval, but she'd been bypassing those votes and pocketing the fees. The fake survey? That wasn't just about me. It was a blueprint for how she'd manipulated property boundaries to grant herself leverage over homeowners who didn't pay. In one case, she'd had a neighbor's permit denied for a greenhouse, then offered to fix it for a quiet fee. That neighbor paid $600 in cash. The permit was suddenly approved. No record of the vote ever existed. The DA filed multiple felony charges: fraud, forgery, abuse of office, unlicensed financial activity, and conspiracy to commit zoning violations. The cash ledger showed over 40 residents had made payments totaling more than $25,000. The HOA board held a special meeting this time with a county official present. Angela took the podium, no microphone needed. We are dissolving the board as it currently exists. In consultation with the County Compliance Office, we'll be transitioning to a moderated community council until a new charter is drafted. A man in a blue tie stood next to her. He was introduced as Marcus Lane, a municipal oversight specialist sent to guide the transition. His presence meant one thing: the HOA was no longer in control of itself. It was under administrative supervision. Marcus stepped forward. A full audit will be performed. All residents will receive copies of the final report. Any funds misused will be pursued through civil court. If you were coerced into paying fees or bribes, we will assist you in filing restitution claims. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. But the man next to me leaned over and whispered, "You started this. You didn't let it slide." No applause followed. Just nods. The kind of nods you give when you finally understand what went wrong and how deep it ran. Over the following weeks, repairs began. Not to homes to trust. Residents formed committees, not just for oversight, but for planning. Zeke helped design a new community map with clearly marked property lines and shared spaces. Independent surveyors volunteered to verify every dispute still lingering. No more guesswork. No more pink tape. The newly formed council voted to eliminate fines entirely for the next year. Instead, they introduced a peer mediation system. If a complaint arose, it went to a panel of 3 neutral residents who would verify the issue and recommend a solution, no penalties unless approved unanimously. Angela stayed on, but only as a liaison. She didn't want authority. She wanted accountability. Judith pled guilty to 4 counts in exchange for a reduced sentence. The judge didn't go easy. She received 18 months in county jail plus 5 years probation and was ordered to pay restitution to every resident she defrauded. Her home was seized and sold at auction to help fund the repayments. I saw her once more briefly. In court during the sentencing hearing. She wore a gray suit that didn't fit right and kept her eyes on the floor. She didn't speak. Her attorney did all the talking. The judge didn't mince words. You abused a position of trust in a community that placed its homes, its peace, and its money in your hands. You forged documents, manipulated residents, and accessed funds illegally for personal gain. That isn't oversight. That's corruption. When the sentence was read, she didn't flinch. But she didn't look up either. Afterward, people lingered outside the courthouse. Not to celebrate. Just to breathe. For the first time in months, the air felt clean. I went home, poured a drink, and sat on my porch. The fence, that same fence she'd challenged with lies and tape, still stood. Still legal. Still mine. Across the street, a boy rode by on a bike with a homemade flag attached to the back. It read, "We run this block." It was probably just a game, but I laughed anyway. Later, Angela dropped off a letter. It was from the new community council, an invitation to join as an advisor for property disputes. Voluntary. No title. Just a seat at the table. I accepted. Not because I wanted power, but because I'd already seen what happened when the wrong person had it. The neighborhood kept changing. A mural went up on the side of the old HOA office, a hand holding a compass, painted by a local high schooler. Below it were the words, "We found our way back." And we had. No more fake surveys. No more secret accounts. No more clipboards scribbling lies. Just neighbors finally making decisions together with eyes wide open.